Chapter 1. The Commander's Morning. The smell of polished steel and stale ozone was the scent of power. For Commander Jax Roric, it was better than any alpha cologne. It was the scent of order. Jax sat at his obsidian desk, the centerpiece of his Citadel command office. The room itself was a monument to brutal efficiency, concrete and sharp angles, with panoramic security screens replacing windows. He didn't need a view of the weak city below. He needed control. He signed the execution orders for a dozen minor traitors. The ink flowed across the parchment, dark and final. Not only that, the names meant nothing to him. They were just variables removed from the equation of his regime. Jax operated on the simple belief that dominance was the only currency, because his alpha status was earned through relentless discipline, not weakness. A chime broke the silence. Lieutenant Varys appeared on a peripheral screen, his face a mask of practiced deference. Varys's scent, usually crisp and obedient, held a thin, unsettling metallic edge, excitement masked by caution. "Commander Roric," Varys said, his voice clipped. "The preliminary reports are on your terminals, sir. Resistance activity continues to escalate. They call themselves the Covenant of the Unbound." Jax flicked a thumb across the screen. The report highlighted the rising use of sophisticated data hacks, allegedly orchestrated by Omegas. Jax scoffed. Omega-led resistance. Pathetic. He let the words hang, heavy and dismissive. In that moment, he saw them as less than a threat. They were a systemic failure, a problem easily corrected by force. Why couldn't they just stay in line? But then, Varys cleared his throat, snapping Jax's attention back. "We did capture a high-value asset this morning, Commander. My name is Lyra Vane, known operative in the Central Cell. She's being prepared for the public tribunal this afternoon." Jax leaned back, the leather of his chair groaning softly in protest. This was better. A high-value capture. A tool for public display. Good. We need a clean example today. The citizens below are getting restless because Solon demands perfect order. He felt a deep satisfaction, the primal alpha urge to crush defiance. Truth be told, the violence wasn't just policy, it was instinct. He dismissed Varys with a curt nod. Lyra Vane. The name was insignificant. She was just the next piece of meat for the grinder. He reviewed the docket for the tribunal, running lines of public condemnation through his mind. He needed to be sharp, convincing, and utterly terrifying. Meanwhile, deep in the Citadel's sublevels, the captive Omega was unknowingly preparing the stage for the destruction of Jax's entire world. Chapter 2. Solon's Shadow. The air in Solon's private penthouse reeked of expensive synthetics and old, settled fear. Unlike Jax's utilitarian office, Solon's space was cloaked in heavy, velvet shadows, because the Grand General preferred to operate in the gloom. Jax stood at attention, his posture rigidly perfect. He'd spent decades cultivating this flawless alpha facade, yet standing before Solon always made his secondary pulse flutter, a tiny, traitorous admission of vulnerability. "Jax," Solon said, his voice like dry leaves scraping pavement. He circled the commander slowly, his ancient eyes, yellowed like old parchment, examining every stitch of Jax's uniform. "You handle the rabble well. Efficient. Clean." "Thank you, General," Jax replied, his own voice a low, steady rumble of authority. Still, he couldn't shake the sense of being appraised, like a valuable, dangerous hound. Solon stopped directly in front of him, invading Jax's personal space. He raised a hand, tracing the gilded piping on Jax's collar. "Do not confuse efficiency with necessity, Jax." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your authority is granted. It is a tool I use. As a result, if the tool rusts or, God forbid, develops ideas above its station, it is replaced." A cold dread coiled in Jax's stomach. Replaced. Solon was reminding him that his alpha dominance was only valid because it served the regime. Jax knew the history. Alphas who became too popular, too self-possessed, often disappeared. "The tribunal today," Solon continued, pulling away. "It must be a lesson etched in pain. The people must see that even the quietest Omega defiance is met with the loudest, bloodiest answer. They need a public execution, no, a shaming. They need to understand the true price of treason. Not only that, Solon casually mentioned the fate of Jax's former colleague, Commander Kairos, who had been executed 2 months prior for softness toward a beta uprising. Kairos had once confided in Jax about wanting to see the regime slightly modernized, slightly less brutal. Did you ever wonder, Jax thought, what you would do if the orders went against the last shred of your own decency? This was the open loop of morality Solon constantly tested. It will be done, General. Brutally, Jax assured him, crushing the image of Kairos from his mind. He was committed to this machine because he believed the machine was the only thing preventing total chaos. Good, Jax. You are loyal, unwavering. Solon's smile was thin, chilling.
Go.
Make an example of this Lyra Vane. Let the air itself taste the fear of the Omega. Jax left the penthouse, the oppressive weight of Solon's expectations pressing on his shoulders like a steel yoke. Yet, beneath the loyalty, a subtle, nascent seed of resentment was sown. He wasn't loyal to the brutality, he was loyal to the order.
He needed to believe that.
He needed to be reminded of the difference. With every heartbeat, he strode faster toward the execution chamber, needing to prove Solon's assessment of him was correct. Chapter 3. The Waiting Cage. The atmosphere in the tribunal chamber was thick and suffocating, like a heavy woolen blanket woven with hundreds of eager, aggressive alpha scents. The scent of anticipation, sharp, metallic, and hungry, pricked at Jax's nostrils. The arena was a vast, open concrete bowl designed for maximum visibility, as if the world narrowed its focus to this one brutal spot. Jax took his place high on the dais. Below, in a cage woven from electrified steel bars, was Lyra Vane. He stared at her, assessing his prey. Early 20s. Slight build. Dark, pulled-back hair. She looked utterly unremarkable, a piece of plain gray stone amongst polished gems. No matter how hard she tried to project innocence, his alpha instinct should have picked up something: fear, defiance, Omega pheromones, but there was only a void. Her scent was completely suppressed, flat, like sterile air. A dormant Omega, he realized. A phenomenon known but rarely encountered, one whose pheromonal systems were recessive or artificially shut down. This made her, ironically, a perfect target for the display, an Omega without the biological markers of weakness, who would be made weak by sheer force of will. He rehearsed his opening lines: the condemnation of treason, the necessity of hierarchy. He pictured the moment he would reach out, grab her, and force a physical reaction, breaking her spirit for the cameras. Before either could speak, Jax felt nothing, no mating pull, no possessiveness, just cold, professional obligation. But then, as she lifted her head, their eyes locked. Her eyes weren't bright, nor were they terrified. They were the color of cold, deep storm water, and they held a profound, unnerving stillness. There was no plea, no fear, not even hatred, only judgment. In that moment, she looked not like a captive, but like a predator watching an unwary guard. What scared him more? The thought that she wasn't afraid, or the fleeting, irrational fear that he was the one being judged? He pushed the disturbing flicker away. It had to be a trick of the poor lighting. Jax stood, the movement of his uniform rustling, loud in the charged silence. He descended the steps toward the cage, his boots echoing his authority. The crowd went silent, breaths held tight. With every step he took, the anticipation of the crowd became a tangible, heavy presence. He reached the cage, signaling for the door to be opened. He would handle the humiliation personally. She's mine to break, he thought, striding confidently into the arena. I will show them what happens to Omegas who forget their place. The air thickened around them, heavy with impending violence. This was the exact moment he had prepared for, but Jax had no way of knowing he was walking, not toward his triumph, but into his shattering defeat. Chapter 4. The Reversal. The distance between them felt like a foot, but it might as well have been a mile. Jax reached out, his heavy gauntlet hand closing around Lyra's slender neck. His alpha pheromones, usually a suffocating wave of instant submission, surged, a calculated, final dose of dominance. "You came here to die, Omega," he rumbled, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. But then, something completely unexpected happened. It wasn't a growl that answered him, or a whimper, but a searing, biological explosion. The dormant mate bond, dormant no more, ignited in his chest like a nuclear fire. It ripped through his every nerve, as if pulled by a string, violently welding his essence to hers. It was a blinding, humiliating rush of pure, overpowering connection and primal, possessive pain. It made him gasp, a guttural, ugly sound that was instantly drowned out by the chaos. In the span of a breath, the world tilted. His mind, trained for war, stalled. A beat later, Lyra moved. It wasn't the frantic, untrained movement of a prisoner. Her body moved on instinct, fast as a striking viper. Her free hand darted up, impossibly finding a precise pressure point, a minor alpha vulnerability in the juncture of the neck and shoulder. A sudden, sharp, shocking pain, a physical lightning bolt, overrode the mental anguish of the bond. His massive body crumpled. The commander, the alpha, the symbol of the regime, dropped to his knees, utterly incapacitated, gasping like a drowning man, the agonizing biological need of the bond overwhelming his system. Humiliation, hot and toxic, flooded him. His world was now defined by a single, agonizing reality. She was his mate, and she had just broken him. Lyra didn't retreat. She pressed the attack, kneeling beside him, her lips brushing his ear. Her non-scent, usually suppressed, was now tinged with something sharp, mint, iron, and utter menace. "Obey, Alpha," she whispered, her voice colder than the Citadel steel. "Or I break the bond now and we both perish. Right here. Right now." Jax tried to speak, tried to roar, but only a desperate wheeze escaped. His alpha wolf, stunned by the instant subjugation and the mate connection, was reeling, confused, betrayed, and physically terrified. He felt the crippling pulse of distress she broadcasted directly through the bond, a unique kind of agony only she could inflict. He knew with dreadful, absolute certainty that she meant it. Just like that, Lyra Vane took everything he was. His dominance was surrendered, not to love, but to a chokehold. Meanwhile, the arena guards were frozen, watching their commander fall like a marble statue. Chapter 5. The Force Choice. The bond was a live wire now, humming beneath Jax's skin, a constant reminder of the failure that had dropped him to his knees. His guards, confused, loyal, but terrified, dragged him away, declaring a medical emergency. He lay on a gurney in the Citadel's medical wing, but Lyra wasn't far. She was a psychic scream in the back of his mind, as the bond pulsed, cold and sharp. Find a way to kill her, his alpha instinct screamed. This is an abomination. Reject the shame. But then, the bond would pulse again, tighter this time, a visceral warning. He tasted bile and felt the phantom pain in his core, because Lyra's omega control was absolute. He couldn't reject the bond without destroying himself, and he couldn't destroy her without killing the only being his alpha wolf now recognized as essential. "You can't," Lyra's voice echoed in his head, cold and tactical, not emotional. "You are mine now. My weapon." He tried to sit up, sweat pasting his hair to his temples. Yet he failed. His body refused to move against the bond's command, a devastating biological betrayal. He had always defined himself by his alpha strength and his rigid, unwavering loyalty to the regime. Now, both were meaningless against this fragile, terrifying Omega. He knew what Solon would do. When Solon learned of the bond, a dominant alpha subdued by an Omega operative, he wouldn't hesitate. He wouldn't care about the fated connection. He would execute Lyra, and the biological self-destruction of the bond would kill Jax instantly. That's why his immediate goal shifted from killing her to ensuring her survival, because her survival meant his. "What do you want?" he ground out, The words raw and laced with fury, directed at the ceiling, yet meant only for her. The answer came instantly, relayed across the terrifyingly intimate connection. My revenge.
Selon S. Destruction.
You will be the shield that gets me there. Get me into your private quarters, now. If I am found, you die first. A Trojan horse, Jax realized, his mind accustomed to rapid strategy in battle, core strength, adaptability, finally kicking into gear. He had to make a choice. Die with his honor intact, or live in humiliating servitude to the Omega who is using him to destroy his entire world. Between one breath and the next, the decision was made. He would survive. He had to understand this power, because understanding was the only path back to control. Chapter 6. Crossing the Threshold. Jax used sheer force of will to override the pain and sit up. He barked orders, his alpha authority, though cracked, still formidable enough to terrify the junior medical staff. He declared the incident a highly experimental nerve agent attack, requiring immediate quarantine. So, he was able to secure Lyra, now hastily disguised in a medical shroud, under his personal escort. Moments later, they were moving through the Citadel corridors. The stone underfoot was cold, the air in the command center humming with suppressed anxiety. Every alpha they passed stiffened, acknowledging Jax's dominance, but the scent of confusion was thick in the air. Jax kept his jaw tight, relying on the sheer terror of his reputation to mask the humiliation boiling beneath his skin. Lyra walked silently beside him. She moved with an eerie grace, as if the world moved too slowly for her. He glanced down at her, seeing her face partially hidden, her eyes flat and alert. He knew he was actively aiding a prisoner, committing the highest treason. His unwavering loyalty was dissolving into a desperate, self-preserving compromise. They reached the door to his private quarters, a highly secured, biometric-locked refuge. This was his sanctuary, the place where the commander dropped the mask. He scanned his hand, and the heavy door had open. He shoved Lyra inside. The room was Spartan, expensive, and sterile, a reflection of the man he used to be. In the quiet that followed, the door sealed with a heavy, final clunk. Jax whirled, rage finally eclipsing the bond's pain. You'll tell me everything now. The bond, what is it? Why is it active, and how the hell did you train to drop an alpha that quickly? He lunged, not to attack, but to intimidate, to reclaim the space, to force a reaction that wasn't calculated. Instead, Lyra did not flinch. She simply held up her hand. Clutched in her palm, glinting under the recessed lighting, was a small, wickedly curved piece of polished steel, a military-grade scalpel, likely stolen from the medical room. I am a solution, Jax Roric, not a puzzle for you to solve, she stated, her voice even, almost bored. And this is my assurance. If the bond doesn't kill you for treachery, this blade will. I am committed to my mission of revenge, because the price of failure is total annihilation. Jax froze, the memory of her pressure point attack and the searing bond pain too fresh. Her lethal capability was confirmed, and his last shred of physical dominance dissolved. He was now locked into the conflict, the prisoner of his own mate, trapped in the heart of his enemy's fortress. His name hung in the air between them, not as a title of power, but as a term of ownership. Chapter 7. Terms of Service. The scalpel still gleamed in Lyra's hand, a tiny, terrible star against the sterile white of Jax's desk. Jax stood stiffly, his hands clenched, the alpha instinct to seize control battling the biological leash of the bond. You are my weapon, Jax, Lyra began, her voice crisp and clear, devoid of the soft edges most Omegas used. Your access is my entry. Your rank is my shield. Your strength is my tool. That's why you will obey. Not out of affection, but out of necessity. She moved toward his command console, scanning the room with a cold, assessing gaze. Lyra wasn't interested in romance or primal urges. She was interested in treason. In the quiet that followed, Jax watched her, fascinated and appalled. He had never encountered such complete, calculated focus. Where was the fear? Where was the submission? My goal, she continued, pulling up a deeply encrypted military dossier, is Grand General Solon. Because of that, we dismantle this regime from the inside. Your Citadel is the key. Every secure network, every coded transmission, every personal appointment, I need it all. Jax felt a surge of professional admiration, quickly choked by betrayal. He was listening to the architect of his destruction. On the other hand, he couldn't deny her effectiveness. He spent years fighting the resistance, and here Lyra was using him to walk right through the front door. And what about the bond? Jax demanded, his voice a low growl of frustration. You force a mate bond on me, then treat me like a prisoner. This connection, it demands acknowledgement. Lyra turned, her stormwater eyes meeting his, completely unmoved. The bond is leverage, nothing more. It's an evolutionary quirk that I have learned to control, and its only function now is to keep your alpha brain from overriding your survival instinct. Do not mistake a biological chain for an emotional one, Commander. She had named his greatest fear, that his entire life, his pride, his dominance, his power, was now subject to her calculated will. Her world tilted from alpha rule to omega control, and he was forced to adapt. He suddenly realized Lyra was a strategist far beyond any alpha general he had ever known. Without thinking, he conceded the point, accepting the terrifying truth. Survival depended on his adaptability, not his strength. Soon after, an urgent communication chime sliced through the tension. It was his second-in-command, Lieutenant Darren. Darren was sharp, ambitious, and utterly loyal to Jax. His scent, even through the comms, was sharp with suspicion. Commander, I need immediate confirmation that the medical bay lockdown is secure, Darren's voice stated, tight with urgency. The official reports on the nerve agent are thin, sir.
Jax met Lyra's gaze.
The test had begun. Chapter 8. The Shadow of Suspicion. Jax's hand slammed down on the comm panel, cutting off Darren's video feed. Lyra raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something amusement, crossing her lips. Darren is methodical. He will not let this go, Jax muttered, running a hand through his cropped hair. He could practically smell the lieutenant's rising paranoia through the Citadel's vents. Then you deal with your subordinate, Commander, Lyra instructed coolly, turning back to the console, already accessing restricted files. As if pulled by a string, her focus remained absolute. Jax took a slow, deep breath, centering the cold rage that used to be his weapon. He activated the comm channel again, allowing only his voice to transmit.
Lieutenant Darren.
Your diligence is noted. Now, back to your post. Jax injected a lethal, low growl into his voice, the sound that usually sent subordinates scurrying. This was his old alpha tactic, absolute dominance through vocal and pheromonal presence. But then, Darren pushed back. Sir, with respect, protocol demands an immediate debriefing of the attending medics. Because the story of a rogue nerve agent targeting only the Alpha Commander during a routine execution is simply illogical. I need an Alpha Command confirmation of the captive's disposal. Jax felt a tremor of pure panic. Darren was too close. He knew that the moment Darren started digging into the prisoner's disposal, or lack thereof, their entire cover would disintegrate. Deep down, he knew the truth, Jax thought. The intimidation wasn't working. The dominance was gone. He had to be strategic because his alpha status was compromised. Jax leaned close to the microphone, injecting every ounce of residual authority he possessed into his tone. He didn't growl. He spoke like a glacier cracking.
Darren.
You are exceeding your authority. Your loyalty is to the chain of command, not to speculation. The event is classified. One more query, Lieutenant, and you will be facing immediate transfer to the disciplinary unit on the South Wall. The threat was clear. The South Wall was a frozen, desolate post for disgraced officers. As the silence stretched across the comms, Jax waited. Finally, Darren's voice came back, tight and strained. Understood, Commander. Proceeding with perimeter security review. Jax cut the connection, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. He'd won the moment, but he'd lost his comfort. He was failing to control his environment, a massive blow to his self-perception as a commander. What followed was a sickening realization. He had just threatened a loyal officer to protect an enemy of the state, his mate. Lyra, still looking at the screen, offered a dry assessment. He fears the South Wall more than the truth.
For now.
That buys us perhaps 6 hours. Chapter 9. First Test of Command. Lyra worked for another hour, her slender fingers flying across the console, navigating firewalls that Jax himself had designed. She moved with an easy competence, as if the world waited for her to issue commands. I need a resource draw. Level 7 access, Section Beta, 9. Lyra announced, her voice flat. It's high risk. I need to pull tactical schematics for the supply depots. Jax tensed. Section Beta, 9 was monitored by Captain Kren, a trustworthy Beta officer who had served under Jax for years. To make things worse, activating Level 7 access triggered automatic, localized security alarms in that sector. If you trigger the alarm, Kren will lock down the server farm instantly, Jax argued. It's his job. He'll report directly to Solon's security chief. Lyra didn't look up. Then you will go, right now, and override the lockdown protocol. You will use your alpha status to declare a false positive and sacrifice a junior officer on duty, blame him for dereliction. You will pin the fault on a scapegoat, because the truth is unacceptable. The request hit Jax like a physical blow. Sacrificing a scapegoat to maintain cover was standard military protocol, but doing it now, to protect the person dismantling his regime, felt utterly contemptible. Still, he knew he had to choose. The integrity of his command structure, or Lyra's mission, and his life. You're asking me to throw away a man's career for schematics, Jax said, the air thick with the smell of his suppressed distress. Lyra finally looked at him, and for the first time, Jax saw a flash of something that wasn't cold. It was fierce, unwavering conviction. I am asking you to throw away one man's career to protect a mission that will save hundreds from Solon's next purge. You chose to live, Jax. As the bond pulsed, that choice came with a price. He swallowed, tasting the metallic tang of moral compromise. He remembered Solon's chilling indifference. He realized that Lyra's ruthlessness was a calculated shield, whereas his own military brutality had just been unquestioning obedience. Which one, he asked, already moving toward the door, defeated by her logic. Ensign Telver.
He's new.
Expendable. Jax rushed out, the heavy steel door shushing shut behind him. He handled the situation brutally, declaring Ensign Telver incompetent and overriding the alarm system, sacrificing the young man's future, without a blink. The act was swift and precise, the perfect commander's response, but it left a freezing weight in his chest. By the time Jax returned, exhausted and spiritually drained, Lyra had the data. She was pulling the schematics onto a secure drive. She coolly handed him the key data packet, a minor victory bought entirely at Jax's moral expense. We have the information, Lyra said, her voice registering satisfaction. Now we move to planning the sabotage. Tell me everything you know about military surveillance rotations. The question was a demand, forcing him deeper into his role as her collaborator. Chapter 10. The Necessary Betrayal. The key data packet Lyra had acquired felt like a pebble of ice in Jax's hand. They spent the next 2 hours huddled over his terminal, the dim light of the screen reflecting in their eyes. Lyra, with a detached, chilling brilliance, mapped out the vulnerabilities of the Citadel's core security. We need a permanent blind spot in the Sector Gamma surveillance, Lyra stated, circling a junction on the schematic with a stylus. This is the primary infiltration route for my external allies. That's why it must be completely dark for a 48-hour window. Jax stared at the junction. That's Commander Thorne's jurisdiction. He is meticulous. His access codes rotate daily because he is the most trusted asset we have. Thorne was an old war friend, a beta whose loyalty was built on shared trenches and spilled blood, not political convenience. Then you must be more meticulous, Jax, Lyra countered, her gaze unwavering. You will subtly alter the rotation algorithm. You will plant a ghost error in the schedule, blaming the lapse on a faulty patch 2 months ago. It must be undetectable by Thorn, yet exploitable by the Covenant. Jax stood up, suddenly needing distance from the console and Lyra's scent of quiet command. In that moment, he felt physically ill. This was no longer about self-preservation or abstract treason. This was about actively betraying a man he respected, a man who trusted him implicitly. He felt the insidious poison of guilt, a sensation he hadn't experienced since he was an untested recruit. Thorn, he's a loyalist, Jax ground out. Loyalty to a monster is not a virtue, Commander. It is a complicity, Lyra returned, without passion. Still, her words struck him with the force of a blow because they mirrored the unsettling thought he'd had in Solon's penthouse. He knew Lyra was right. Thorn's unquestioning adherence to Solon's brutal policies made him an obstacle to justice. But the act itself, the cold, calculated manipulation of a friend, was dissolving the last remnants of Jax's military honor. Before he could move, he accepted the truth. His actions were moving beyond self-preservation and were now direct acts of treason against the men he had commanded. He sat down, his shoulders slumped, and pulled up the access panel. "Give me the parameters," he said, his voice flat. He spent the next 30 minutes executing the delicate, irreversible betrayal. The air thickened with the scent of his despair and Lyra's clinical satisfaction. Eventually, the altered surveillance route was approved by the system's deep core, creating the necessary window for Lyra's plan. Jax felt the sickening weight of commitment. But then, the main comm panel flashed red. It wasn't a subordinate this time. It was Grand General Solon himself, demanding Jax's immediate presence, and, unnervingly, requesting the presence of the commander's new administrative assistant, Lyra Vane, using the alias Lyra he had quickly fabricated for her. Chapter 11. The Midpoint Shift, Solon's Reveal. Solon's office was even darker now, the shadows seeming to pulse with malevolence. Jax stood slightly behind Lyra, who played her role as the silent, efficient assistant with terrifying ease, her scent completely suppressed. Jax was a tightly wound wire of nerves, waiting for Solon to expose their lie. Solon ignored the newcomers, instead projecting a 3D tactical map onto the center of the floor. It showed a densely populated, low-income sector of the city, Sector Delta. "Gentlemen, ladies," Solon addressed the small assembly of high command. "The resistance believes they are safe in the slums. They hide among the poor and the weak. That's why we removed the shield." Solon's finger hovered over the map. "In 3 days, we will execute Operation Cinder, a coordinated counterterror strike. We will saturate Sector Delta with sonic disruptors and pheromonal neutralizers. We will not target military assets. We will target the innocent, the citizens who might harbor them." The scale of the intended carnage slammed into Jax. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, would be killed, simply to flush out a handful of resistance leaders. This wasn't a strategy. It was mass murder disguised as crowd control. His hands started shaking, no longer from the bond's pull, but from pure, moral revulsion. "This is what I serve. This is the monster I protect." In that moment, the illusions Jax had clung to, that the regime was a necessary evil, shattered like glass. He realized that Lyra's initial goal, revenge, wasn't justified, it was imperative. The core emotional question for Jax was violently reframed: can dominance be surrendered without losing self-worth? The answer was becoming clear. He already lost his self-worth by maintaining dominance over this atrocity. Lyra remained perfectly still, but Jax felt a sudden spike of icy, focused fury pulse through the mate bond, sharp as a needle. She saw the same monstrous truth he did. Solon smiled, a predatory gleam in his aged eyes. "Commander Roric, your team will handle the strike team logistics. Personal oversight. Ensure nothing, absolutely nothing, delays Operation Cinder." Before the words left her lips, Lyra offered a polite, emotionless nod, giving Solon no reason for suspicion. As a result, Jax was now forced to choose between his ingrained, unwavering loyalty to the monster and the Omega whose acceptance he was now beginning, against his will, to crave, the Omega who was fighting for the innocent. Between them, something cracked, and it wasn't the Citadel's concrete. Chapter 12. The Choice. The moment the heavy vault door of Jax's quarters closed behind them, the rigid control he'd maintained in Solon's presence snapped. He staggered back against the wall, fighting the urge to vomit. "He's going to slaughter them," Jax whispered, the words tasting like ash. "In 3 days.
Delta sector."
Lyra shed her assistant persona instantly, moving with tactical precision to the communication dampeners. "We have 72 hours. He has given you the keys to the kill systems. That's why we hit the logistics. We introduce a crippling failure into the sonic deployment codes. It requires your personal access key and biometric lock." She didn't plead. She didn't have to. Lyra simply laid out the path to salvage his soul. "If I do this," Jax said, his voice strained, "there is no going back. I am branded a traitor. Executed. My lineage, my name, erased. I will have nothing left." Lyra stepped closer, and for the first time, she placed a hand on his arm. The gesture wasn't romantic. It was a comrade's touch, a soldier offering a lifeline. Still, the simple contact of the mate bond, combined with the moral clarity of her mission, was overwhelming. "You already have nothing left here, Jax. Your honor was forfeited the moment you decided to sign orders for a madman," she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense murmur. "But you can gain something back. You can gain the truth of yourself. Choose which side of the massacre you stand on." Jax stared down at her. He saw not the Omega prisoner, but the formidable woman whose freedom he had once sought to crush, and whose conviction now offered him redemption. He finally understood his deep-rooted secret/burden. The belief that alpha dominance was a divine right was fundamentally flawed. Maybe it was fate, but the choice was clear. "The codes," Jax said, pushing away from the wall. His voice was heavy, but steady. "The kill switch codes for the deployment system are tied to my retinal scan. I will open the file for you. We sabotage the mission because this is not order. This is tyranny." He moved to the terminal. He activated the secure system, his hands now trembling with purpose, not fear. He initiated the sequence and stepped back, letting Lyra perform the final, irreversible act of technological treason. Just like that, everything changed. Lyra, efficient and focused, worked the codes. When she finished, she looked up at Jax, and a slow, almost imperceptible nod passed between them, the first genuine acknowledgement of shared purpose. "It is done, Commander. You are no longer serving Solon," she confirmed. With a single glance, Jax had sealed his fate as a traitor. He had given Lyra the secure keys to the weapon systems. Now, they were bound, not by a bond of dominance, but by a mission of life-or-death subversion, aimed directly at the Grand General. Chapter 13. The First Blow. The commander's quarters were silent, the air thick with tension and the residual scent of fear. Jax sat before the security feeds, monitoring the launch sequence for Operation Cinder. Lyra stood behind him, her entire focus channeled into the tactical screen, as if the world narrowed to those flashing digits. His heart hammered a furious rhythm against his ribs. This was it, the moment his treason became fact. He had initiated the system's sequence himself, his biometric key opening the door for Lyra's planted corruption. The clock ticked down. $10. $5. $1. The screen flared, showing the deployment vehicles rolling out of the Citadel base. But then, instead of proceeding on the predicted route towards Sector Delta, the entire convoy stalled. A simultaneous, system-wide error message, code 88, fatal navigational corruption, flashed across every monitor. The sabotage was successful. Operation Cinder was crippled. Sector Delta was saved. A massive, alien wave of relief washed over Jax. It wasn't the relief of a commander avoiding conflict. It was the profound, unfamiliar relief of a man who had narrowly averted a mass atrocity. He had committed treason, yet he had done something undeniably right. His heart skipped a beat, energized by the unexpected nobility of the act. Confirmed. Total system shut down, Lyra murmured, the first trace of satisfaction Jax had ever heard in her voice. She felt it, clear as day, the minor victory. "They won't know how this happened for hours," Jax stated, his voice shaky with adrenaline. "It looks like a deep-level technical error. A massive, catastrophic failure in the new code deployment." Still, the moment of triumph was desperately brief. The main comm panel, the one linked directly to Solon's private channel, began to flash. The color wasn't red. It was the low, dangerous amber of deep scrutiny. Lyra's scent sharpened instantly. "The general is not panicking. He's investigating. Because of that, we have seconds before he initiates the security quarantine." Jax took a steadying breath. He had anticipated rage. He had not anticipated this deadly, measured calm. He was now an active collaborator, and that meant his risks had just become terminal. With his scent in the air mingling with Lyra's icy focus, he accepted the gravity of his new reality. Chapter 14. Solon's Counter. The atmosphere in the restricted conference room was thick with Solon's simmering, controlled fury. The air was dry, and Jax could feel the pheromonal suppressants working overtime, meant to stifle any emotional display. Solon sat alone, an interrogation in its purest form. "Commander Roric," Solon began, his eyes like two polished shards of obsidian. "Explain to me why the most important operation in 6 months failed due to a flaw in code you personally signed off on." Jax stood at attention, forcing his gaze to remain steady. "Technical failure, General. The new security patch created a cascade error in the navigation arrays. I am investigating the responsible subordinate now." But then, Solon smiled. It wasn't a pleasant sight. "Subordinates are distractions, Jax. You are the commander. You and your new little assistant Lyra. How is she fitting in?" "Very efficient, I hear." The casual mention of Lyra was a gut punch. Solon was close, too close. As the silence roared, Jax felt the urge to shield Lyra, a protective instinct completely foreign to his old alpha self. "She is adequate, General," Jax replied, using his core strength, adaptability to lie convincingly. He kept his tone completely neutral, relying on his years of command training to project confidence where there was only terror. "Adequate," Solon repeated, leaning forward. "Funny, she was seen leaving your quarters late last night, after the supposed medical emergency. That seems irregular for a mere assistant." Jax's mind raced. He had to divert the scrutiny immediately. "Irregularity demands attention, General. I was using her to run internal diagnostics on my personal console. Because the code failure originated there, I needed to ensure my system wasn't compromised by a remote agent." Lie. Solon let the silence hang, testing the lie. Not only that, Solon activated a small comm unit on his desk. "Jax, try calling your external alpha network. The one you established for off-site resource management." Jax felt a surge of cold dread.
He tried.
The comm system was dead. Just like that, Solon revealed his hand. "An independent investigation, Commander. I've cut your personal lines. You are currently isolated, Jax. You are a tool I am testing. Do not fail the test." Jax felt physically shaken. Solon had systematically isolated him, cutting him off from any potential external help or escape. The risk was now existential. Without warning, Solon dismissed him with a flick of his wrist. Jax returned to his quarters, his uniform smelling faintly of the sterile pheromone neutralizer and his own sheer terror. His breath caught when he saw Lyra waiting. "He knows," Jax rasped, his sense spiked with fear. Lyra, ever the pragmatist, merely touched his arm, reading the spike. "He suspects treason, but he suspects your motive is pride. He doesn't suspect mine is revenge." She felt it, clear as day, the terror that fueled his honesty. "He is tightening the leash, Jax. That means our time is running out." Chapter 15. The Personal Test. Lyra was working at Jax's console, executing a final, deep data dive, a risky move necessary to pinpoint Solon's personal retreat coordinates. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the console hummed, pulling massive amounts of secured data. Jax was pacing, listening to the silence of the Citadel, a dangerous, pregnant quiet. With every heartbeat, he knew they were exposed. But then, the external security system of his quarters triggered a full, piercing lockdown alarm. Not from Solon's central command, but from a local override. Intruder alert. Lieutenant Darren initiating Level 4 protocol. External breach detected. The automated voice boomed.
Darin, Jax snarled.
He's found the data anomaly. A voice, tight and resolute, came through the external comm unit. Commander Roric. This is Lieutenant Darren. I have irrefutable proof of a deep-level data breach on your personal console. I demand immediate, authorized entry to secure the prisoner, Lyra Vane, and arrest you for treason. Darren had gathered enough evidence of the data irregularities and the missing prisoner to act on his own. This was a plot twist Jax hadn't fully anticipated, the loyal subordinate becoming the immediate, lethal enemy. He knows too much. He's coming in, Jax shouted. Instead of stopping her work, Lyra continued, her eyes fixed on the terminal. You must stop him, Jax.
Now.
If he reports to Solon before I get the final coordinate, we both die, and thousands more will follow. Jax didn't hesitate. He stripped off his jacket, his muscles tensing. This wasn't military strategy. It was primal self-defense, mixed with the absolute need to protect Lyra. As the air thickened, his alpha wolf, silenced by the bond, rose with a feral, protective snarl. He lunged at the door controls, overriding the local lockdown just enough to allow access. Without warning, the heavy steel door slid open just wide enough for Lieutenant Darren to slip through, followed by 2 armed guards. Commander, stand down. You are in violation, Darren yelled, raising his plasma rifle. Stand down, Lieutenant, Jax roared, injecting every ounce of his adrenaline and desperation into the command. He didn't use words. He used sheer alpha presence. The guards hesitated, caught between the commander and the lieutenant. But then, Jax moved. He was a blur of trained alpha force, hitting Darren first, hard and low, before the lieutenant could fire. The fight was brutal, fast, and desperate. Jax fought with the savagery of a cornered animal, fueled by the realization that he was fighting for Lyra's success, more than his own life or military code. He connected with a punishing blow to Darren's jaw.
Darin komplett unconscious.
The 2 guards, stunned and leaderless, lowered their weapons. Jax stood panting, blood dripping from his knuckles, facing his own men, a traitor, drenched in the metallic scent of alpha blood. He felt it, clear as day, the crossing of the point of no return. He had chosen Lyra. Secure him, Jax spat, pointing at Darren. Tell command he attempted a rogue, unauthorized search. He's unstable. Lyra finally finished, pulling the drive and turning to Jax. She didn't thank him. She simply looked at the unconscious lieutenant and the blood on Jax's hands. The coordinates are mine, she stated, her voice quiet but ringing with finality. But the alarm is active. We are trapped, Jax. Solon knows you fought an internal threat to protect something in this room. As the alarm sounded, a high-pitched, insistent wail across the entire Citadel, Jax knew the walls were closing in. They had the coordinates, but they had traded their safety for them. Her chest ached with a shared tension. They were isolated, exposed, and hunted. Chapter 16. The Capture. The high-pitched, metallic shriek of the Citadel-wide alarm was a physical assault, vibrating through the steel floors and Jax's very bones. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and the rising, organized alpha aggression of Solon's elite guards. They're coming, Jax snarled, wiping the blood from his mouth. He moved to secure the door, locking it down with every protocol he knew, but then a new, higher-level override flashed on the console, Solon's code. It won't hold. Solon is overriding my command access, Lyra said, clutching the drive containing the Grand General's retreat coordinates. She looked grim, but her hands were steady, as if the forest watched her every move. Doesn't matter. We fight, Jax declared. He grabbed a heavy, ceremonial plasma blade from the wall, a relic of his former glory. This was his last stand, a desperate, final act of protection for the Omega who had destroyed his life, yet offered him his first taste of real purpose. The door burst inward, not slid, but blown open by a concentrated plasma charge. Solon's personal guard, 10 massive, armored alphas, smelling of discipline and lethal intent, flooded the space. Jax roared, the sound rough and primal, finally releasing the inner conflict that had tormented him. He lunged, a flurry of desperate, trained violence. He was magnificent, a machine of alpha fury, felling 2 guards instantly, using his size and speed to shield Lyra. But then, the numbers overwhelmed him. A guard managed to clip his leg with a stun baton. The shock coursed through him, knocking him off balance. As the air thickened with the smell of scorched metal and alpha sweat, a 3rd guard tackled him. Jax fought ferociously, using his alpha strength to shield Lyra to the last breath. He was finally subdued, held down by 4 men, his limbs locked, his face pressed against the cold, unforgiving floor. Solon entered the room, moving past the broken door as if it were an inconvenience. He didn't look angry, he looked satisfied. He knelt by Jax's head. "You chose treason, Jax. You chose weakness," Solon whispered, devoid of emotion. He reached out and, with slow, insulting deliberation, ripped the rank insignia, the silver commander's eagle, from Jax's uniform. The small tearing sound was louder than the ongoing alarm. "You are stripped of command, stripped of rank, and stripped of honor. You are a traitor to the only thing that mattered, order." Moments later, the guards hauled Lyra away, the drive still clutched in her hand. Jax saw her eyes, fixed on him, not pity, but a brief, intense look of shared devastation. He had lost everything, his rank, his honor, and, critically, his leverage over Lyra, who was now in Solon's direct custody. All that was left was rage, and the chilling certainty of absolute failure. Chapter 17. The Interrogation Pit. Jax was thrown, quite literally, into a cold, dark holding cell in the Citadel sublevels, a pit reserved for the lowest traitors and captured scum. The walls were damp, smelling of mold and old fear. He was alone, his body aching from the fight, his mind tormented by the sudden, chilling silence of the mate bond. "She's gone. She's captured. She's going to be executed." He paced the small cell, a caged predator with no way out. He searched for the bond, that crippling, constant link, but it was gone, suppressed or shielded by Solon's powerful psychic inhibitors. Because of that, the silence was more agonizing than the pain. Even so, he was not totally alone. Through the thin, concrete wall, he could hear muffled, panicked voices. He pressed his ear against the cold stone, realizing he was next to the interrogation cells. "I swear, General, I knew nothing of his motive. He attacked me. He was unstable." It was Lieutenant Darren's voice, tight, desperate, laced with the sharp scent of terror. What followed was Solon's low, deadly monotone. "Unstable? Or treasonous? Darren? Your report is lacking. Your family lives in Sector Gamma, a lovely, vulnerable sector. Do not force me to question your loyalty further, Lieutenant. Tell me everything Roric was doing, and I mean everything." Jax's blood ran cold. Darren wasn't driven by malice. He was driven by fear for his family. Solon wasn't just extracting information. He was corrupting everyone around Jax, using fear to enforce loyalty. Jax realized his actions, trying to be a moral hero, had only secured his own failure and possibly condemned a loyal subordinate to a lifetime of servitude and fear. My God, Jax thought, his chest ached. It wasn't worth it. I failed her. I failed myself. He sank onto the damp floor, feeling utterly defeated. He questioned if his attempt at redemption, surrendering his alpha pride for a higher cause, was worth the catastrophic cost. Deep down, he knew the truth. He had been weak not when he bowed to Lyra, but when he failed to protect her and his allies from Solon's sheer monstrousness. The lowest point was approaching. Chapter 18. The Dark Night of the Soul. The cell was a tomb. Jax sat, head bowed, the humiliation of the capture finally yielding to a bleak, cold resignation. He was stripped bare, no rank, no command, no mate bond, and now no hope. He reviewed his life. He had spent decades believing that alpha dominance and the external validation of the military were the same thing as self-worth. He had believed that power must be seized and controlled in isolation. As the silence roared in his mind, he saw the lie for what it was. His alpha dominance meant nothing when divorced from true principle. It was a hollow shell. He mourned, not for his lost power, but for Lyra. He realized his feeling for her wasn't just strategic or biological. It was genuine, earned respect, and something deeper, love, earned through shared treason and mutual purpose. She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of his own end, or Lyra's fate in Solon's hands. I should have protected her better. I should have planned for betrayal. He was utterly alone, but in solitude, a quiet, fierce acceptance settled over him. He had surrendered dominance, but he had gained self-worth by choosing principle over pride. He had chosen the innocent. He was still a failure, yet he was no longer a hypocrite. This was his humility. He closed his eyes, accepting his fate.
But then,
a faint flicker, a desperate, razor-thin thread, appeared in his mind. The mate bond. It wasn't a painful command, or a possessive snarl. It was a gentle, almost hesitant pulse, quickly followed by a single, encrypted message, a stream of coordinates, and a coded sequence. She's alive. Jax's eyes snapped open. The message wasn't emotional, it was purely tactical. It wasn't Lyra asking him to save her, it was Lyra telling him to act. The sequence, a relic from his early days in the Citadel, a high-level override, was linked to a forgotten, emergency escape route deep within the Foundations. Lyra had found a way to use the only asset Solon hadn't stripped him of, his intrinsic knowledge of the Citadel's deepest secrets. And just like that, everything changed. The despair vanished, replaced by a surge of pure, focused determination. His internal crucible was complete. He was no longer trying to save his honor. He was fighting to save his partner and their shared mission. His soul answered the faint pulse of the bond. The fight was not over. Chapter 19. The Broken Signal. The faint, crackling pulse of the bond was the only thing anchoring Jax to reality. It was a single, repeated mental echo of an encrypted sequence, a coded call sign he hadn't used in years. Phoenix 7. It was a relic, a forgotten emergency protocol from when he himself had first mapped the Citadel sublevels. She's alive, and she's testing me, Jax thought, a surge of adrenaline cleansing the stale air of despair. The message wasn't just a signal, it was an act of profound trust. It confirmed Lyra had been monitoring the Citadel's core architecture and found the single weakness only he would recognize. Because of that, the sequence linked to a forgotten, emergency escape route, a maintenance shaft deep within the Foundations, designed as a failsafe against a full-scale siege. As the bond pulsed with that fragile, tactical thread, Jax felt a spark of resolve, energized by the hope that his adaptability and intimate knowledge of the Citadel were still valuable. Lyra hadn't just saved his life, she had validated his intrinsic worth outside of his rank. He was the key. He was the only one who knew the Phoenix 7 exit. He immediately shifted his focus to the cell door lock. Solon's security was layered, but it relied on power suppression and external monitoring. Jax was stripped of weapons, but his sheer alpha strength, the pure physical core of him, remained. He slammed his shoulder against the weakest point of the steel door, the hinge casing, again and again, a savage, focused burst of energy. Without thinking, his body moved on instinct, fueled by the memory of Lyra's face as she was dragged away.
Crack.
The sound of metal straining was intoxicating. What followed was a brutal, rapid expenditure of physical force. He didn't think about the pain, he thought about Solon's grin. He thought about Sector Delta. With one final, wrenching heave, he tore the heavy steel door from its weakened casing. The sound was deafening, but the cell block was too deep to raise an immediate alert. He stepped out of the tomb. He was still in rags, unarmed, smelling of dust and dried blood, yet he felt reborn. His new immediate goal was clear: follow Lyra's signal and get to the rendezvous point. The climb back had begun. Chapter 20. Escape and Rendezvous. Jax moved through the cold, damp maintenance tunnels beneath the Citadel. The air here was heavy with condensation and the metallic scent of aging conduits, a smell he hadn't encountered since his training days. That's why this environment, devoid of Solon's pristine polish, felt strangely freeing. He navigated by memory and the subtle mental pulses Lyra sent across the bond, tiny, nonverbal directional hints. Meanwhile, his mind raced, formulating the final plan. Lyra is a target, but she has the coordinates. I am the shield, but I have the keys to escape. He encountered 2 patrol guards near a secondary generator. But then, he didn't rely on intimidation. He became a ghost, using the shadows and the noisy churn of the machinery to mask his movements. Her body moved on instinct against the enemy, but Jax moved with calculated silence. He hit them fast, efficiently, knocking them unconscious with precise, concussive blows, securing a small, heavy plasma pistol from one of their belts. One resource secured, he thought grimly. The pistol felt solid and real in his hand, the first piece of his old self he'd reclaimed. With every step he took, the faint signal from Lyra grew stronger, drawing him deeper into the Citadel's foundations. He could almost taste her mental presence, not the searing command but a focused, tactical urgency. Almost there. He found the access point, a rusted, overlooked utility grate marked Phoenix 7. It was exactly where she had indicated. He slid the heavy grate open and dropped into the black void of the final tunnel. Eventually, he emerged into a small, seldom-used sublevel service room. He didn't see her, but he felt her presence, a wave of anticipation and tension that crashed over him through the bond. Lyra, he whispered into the darkness, his voice raw. A sudden, sharp metallic scent of warning hit him. A growl rose in her throat, a nonverbal command to stop. They tracked my signal, she said, her voice coming from the deepest shadow, strained and cold. I used the bond to draw you here, but Solon's security intercepted the frequency. They are surrounding this sublevel now, Jax. We walked into their trap. The tension broke, not in escape, but in the realization of the new, higher danger. Chapter 21. The Unlikely Ally. Jax moved immediately toward the shadow where Lyra was hidden. He felt the rapid, pounding pulse of the bond, a shared, mutual terror that was also oddly stabilizing. Solon's guards are outside. We are trapped in the center of the crosshairs. What's the move, Lyra? We fight out? Jax asked, gripping the plasma pistol tightly.
No.
We can't fight 10 armored alphas in a corridor this tight, she dismissed, her tone crisp. She stepped into the dim light. She looked pale, but her eyes held a defiant fire. She extended her hand, not in affection, but in absolute command. Give me the pistol. I need you to open the outer lock. Because the third party is waiting. They were tracking my signal, not yours. Jax hesitated. A third party? He knew the resistance existed, but he never dealt with them. He trusted no one outside of Lyra now. His thoughts spun.
Who?
We are exposed. The Covenant of the Unbound.
My people.
They thought I was sending an SOS, but I was setting up a retrieval point, Lyra explained. Solon's team is expecting us to fight up through the Citadel. We're going down through the sewer conduits, the one place Alpha Pride refuses to check. Not only that, she revealed the true cost. The leader of the Covenant retrieval team is an Omega named Anya. She doesn't trust Alphas. She especially doesn't trust you. You are the infamous Commander Roric. That's why you must hand over your weapon and your authority immediately, or she leaves us both here for Solon. Jax stared at the pistol, then at Lyra's face. He was being asked to surrender the only weapon he had reclaimed and the last shred of his alpha dominance to an Omega he didn't know, a stranger who actively hated his very existence. He had made peace with Lyra's control, but this was a final, painful test of his new humility. He looked at the unblinking conviction in Lyra's eyes. She trusted them. He had to trust her. Without another word, Jax handed the plasma pistol to Lyra. The gesture was a total surrender of his old life. Lyra took the weapon, her eyes softening microscopically, a flicker of approval that felt more valuable than the highest military decoration. She pointed to a heavy utility hatch bolted to the floor. "Open it, Jax. Our escape route is right there. Anya is waiting." Jax knelt and began to wrestle with the rusted bolts. As the sky darkened over the city above, sealing their fate as fugitives, Jax knew he was no longer Commander Roric. He was simply Jax, Lyra's shield, and a traitor to his entire world. The final battle was about to begin in the tunnels of the damned. We're launching into the final, high-octane act. Jax has chosen his new path and is ready to fight alongside Lyra, not for her. This is where the Alpha's fall completes his redemption. Chapter 22, The Main Showdown. The air in the arena was electric, thick with the scent of fear, but not Lyra's. Solon, standing on the high dais where Jax had stood just days ago, was ready for his spectacle. Below him, Lyra stood alone, facing a circle of armed guards. Jax, still in his ragged, blood-stained uniform, was chained near the execution block, an object of intended public shaming. Behold the traitor, Commander Roric, and the Omega who bewitched him. Solon's voice boomed, heavy with synthetic alpha pheromones designed to induce obedience. But then, the planned humiliation didn't happen. As the bond pulsed a single, sharp command in Jax's mind. Now, everything moved. Lyra didn't wait for Solon's order. She unleashed her full Omega power, not a wave of aggression, but a precise, focused spike of energy that momentarily stunned the guards. Her movement was strategic martial skill, honed by years in the shadows. She snatched a weapon from the nearest guard, turning the enemy's tools against them. In that moment, Jax broke his chains. Not through brute force. Lyra's tactical message Phoenix 7 had also contained instructions on the weak link in the sublevel alloy. He stood beside her, his movement driven by absolute, fierce loyalty. Solon lies. Jax roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. He didn't use his plasma pistol. Instead, he used his intimate military knowledge of the ceremony's weak points. He lunged not at a guard, but at the main comm panel, smashing the broadcasting feed. He planned to murder thousands. Sector Delta was a lie. The arena erupted. The guards, confused by the disruption and the commander's treason, stalled. Jax fought with coordinated precision, defending Lyra's flanks as she took on the central threat. The fight was won not by his dominance, but by coordination and respect. Lyra disarmed and evaded, while Jax used his strength to create openings and secure the area. Solon, seeing his control crumble, reached for his own sidearm. Without thinking, Lyra was faster. She disabled the nearest guard and tackled Solon, her Omega strength proving superior to his shocked, aging alpha power. "You lose, Solon. You gambled on tyranny and you failed," Lyra hissed. Jax stood over Solon, breathing hard, his body bruised but his soul clear. He felt it, clear as day, the profound sense of completion. He had surrendered dominance and gained true, equal self-worth. The thematic question was resolved in a bloody, decisive battle. Solon was exposed and defeated, lying helpless on the floor of the arena he controlled for so long. Chapter 23, The New Authority. The fighting stopped as quickly as it began. The defeated guards, seeing Solon subdued and the commander standing free, laid down their arms. The crowd, initially terrified, erupted into a roar, a chaotic wave of defiance and hope. Jax, his training kicking in, immediately shifted from combat to command. He barked orders, organizing the remaining loyal personnel to secure Solon and stabilize the Citadel. As a result, the chaos was brought to heel, not by aggressive dominance, but by capable direction. But then, when the time came to address the guards and the citizens streaming into the arena, Jax did something that would have been unthinkable days ago. He stepped back. He deferred to Lyra. "Lyra," Jax said, his voice quiet but carrying the full weight of his authority, The people need to hear the truth from their true leader. What are the immediate orders for the Provisional Council? Lyra, though slightly wounded, a shallow plasma burn on her arm, met his eyes. She saw the surrender of pride, and in that surrender, she saw the rise of his true strength. In the echo of his voice, she saw a partner, not a subordinate. She nodded, stepping forward to address the crowd. Her voice, amplified by the arena speakers, was firm, clear, and powerful, laying out the new path for the Covenant. After that, Jax gently tended to Lyra's minor wound, using a sterile field kit retrieved from the medical bay. He didn't use the mate bond to enforce compliance or affection. He did it out of quiet, earned devotion. The space between them burned with a palpable, unspoken connection, a connection built on shared survival and mutual respect. Jax was protective, humble, yet capable, demonstrating his true authority by supporting, not leading, the revolution. Chapter 24. The New Equilibrium. Days later, the stench of old fear had been replaced by the potent, hopeful scent of change. Lyra stood before the Citadel, addressing the newly formed Provisional Council. She spoke of justice, of equity, and of the end of the alpha tyranny. Jax stood visibly beside her, his old, gilded uniform replaced by simple, unranked black clothing. He was an alpha without a title, yet his presence was more powerful than ever. With a single glance, he quelled the murmurs of doubt from the beta officers. He was Lyra's chosen partner, her shield, and her most trusted advisor. In her final address, Lyra looked directly at Jax. When her name left his lips in a moment of quiet focus, she acknowledged his worth, not just his utility. She spoke of the mate bond, no longer as a weapon but as a commitment. "The connection between us is real," Lyra declared to the council, her voice strong. "It is a truth that was forged in blood and validated by choice. Commander Roric sacrificed everything to right the wrongs of this regime. He is a partner in justice, and he serves the new covenant because his loyalty is now to principle, not power." As the bond pulsed with her words, Jax felt acceptance wash over him, a profound, comforting warmth. He had expected her to fully reject the bond as a tool of the old ways, but then she accepted it, acknowledging his value. The new equilibrium was established. The bond was active, based on Lyra's authority and Jax's earned acceptance. He had lost the crown but gained the queen. Epilogue: The partner's devotion. Months later, the commander's quarters were now Lyra's shared planning office. The obsidian desk was cluttered, no longer sterile, but covered with maps, manifestos, and communication logs. The scent of fear was gone, replaced by the potent, omega scent of Lyra's authority, musk, paper, and a faint, sharp scent of lavender. Jax felt only pride in it. Lyra was dealing with the political fallout of a minor secession attempt. Jax, wearing simple, comfortable clothing, worked at a satellite console, using his intimate knowledge of the old systems to protect the new one, planting firewalls, tracing old Solon loyalists, working behind the scenes. He looked up as Lyra sighed, pushing hair from her face. His bones remembered him from the man he used to be, but that man was an echo. The man now was content. He stood and walked over to her. He didn't ask for permission. He simply reached out and gently kissed the plasma scar on her arm, a silent, non-military gesture of affection. "The Beta Sector leader is stalling on the trade routes," Lyra murmured, leaning into his touch, allowing herself a rare moment of vulnerability. "He is intimidated by your lack of alpha title," Jax observed quietly, moving his hands to massage the tension from her shoulders. "I'll send him the logistics breakdown he requested. He understands efficiency. He respects data." Lyra closed her eyes, letting the simple, non-ranked devotion settle over her. With every heartbeat, she felt the depth of his transformation. His savage alpha nature had been replaced by the partner's enduring devotion. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. "Thank you, Jax. It is good to have you here." Jax smiled, a rare, genuine expression that touched his stormwater eyes. "Where else would I be, Lyra? I finally found my place." The finality of their new reality was perfect. Two equals, bound by a fated connection, fighting for the same justice. Jax Roric was no longer the Alpha Commander. He was simply the Omega's partner.